Welcome to the Cinnamon. Now, I know what you're wondering. Why, Daryl, do you sound so strange? And why did you bring such a different energy to this opening? Well, that's because, dear listeners, it is I, Douglas Davidson, half of the Cinnamon. And I am joined today by the always effervescent Daryl Menzel. That's right. You get to be effervescent this time. It is not me.
I feel effervescent. It's weird being on this side of the effervescence. All of a sudden, I have so much more energy than I had 10 minutes ago.
Well, we have a special episode today. We are really excited about this. We actually think this will be much better than episode 10, our primer episode. We didn't think we could top it, but we absolutely are today with episode 69. Insert your joke here. We decided to go actually really, really serious. And we are so excited to have Samantha McDonald with us today, an intimacy coordinator. Hello, Samantha. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. I'm pretty good. Thanks for having me.
No, seriously. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
For those of you that are unaware, Samantha, we found your information on the official Intimacy Coordinator website, which has a number of individuals throughout the United States, and I'm not sure if there are international as well. But you have worked, just to make sure I've got this right, you've been a stunt coordinator on the upcoming They Them. You have been a stunt performer on Black Lightning and The Punisher. You were a stunt driver on Den of Thieves. You were an intimacy coordinator for She-Hulk and Father of the Bride. You were a puppeteer on Willy's Wonderland, which, by the way, I fucking love that movie. Not joking. I did the initial and home release. I love that movie so much. In fact, I now have a question in case you might have an answer. And you've also been an actor as well. So you do everything. You act, you stunt drive, intimacy coordination, stunt performing. That is incredible. Did I leave
modern day
out?
Renaissance woman? I love it.
Oh, funny about that. I used to work in Renaissance fairs and I had a sword fighting show, oddly enough. I do need to make a quick correction though.
Sure.
On They Them, I was a stunt water safety. So I wasn't the stunt coordinator on that one.
Gotcha.
I was there as a water safety individual.
Okay, thank you for the correction. I will immediately after this recording go to IMDb and send them a strongly worded letter. But this is why I wanted to check. This is why I wanted
No, absolutely. And there's a lot of different roles in the stunt, like under the stunt umbrella. So that can all get easy to confuse pretty quickly. But yeah, that's like some of the stuff I've done. Thanks for noticing.
It's incredibly impressive. And from the circles that I certainly know I fall into, there's a ton of people that love a lot of the movies and projects that you've worked on between Den of Thieves. Crystal, my wife, she's the editor for my website, and she's the unofficial sponsor of our podcast as the operator of baking organization Casual Confections. Yeah, I know, right? But she absolutely loved The Punisher. So there's a lot of stuff you've worked on. And so I want to open this up with one specific question, and then we can take it from there.
Okay.
Do you know what Nick Cage's character of Hero was drinking in Willy's Wonderland? Do you have any theories on that?
It was like real life or fake life?
Fake life.
In fake life?
It was real life is so boring.
I think it was just supposed to be some sort of soda, but they never got like any sort of actual cola something. That movie was the best. Like, honestly, I didn't know I had a bucket list movie that I wanted to work on. And then I got hired to work on that one. And I was like, this is it. I've made it. This is everything I've ever wanted in a movie. It really was. It was phenomenal. It was so good. It was so fun.
As a puppeteer, were you working one of the animatronic creatures?
So I was there as a stunt puppeteer specifically. So we had the stunt team had several of the characters. This is my dog, by the way. Sorry.
Hello, puppy. Oh, no. You can bring up the puppy. No. Puppy's been. Hello.
Oh, I got 10 questions for the puppy all by itself. So don't worry about that.
Squash is my dog.
Hello, Squash.
So a lot of there were the several characters that were just in the full outfit. Mm-hmm. I was part of the team that puppeteered the ostrich. So I was mostly its wings and sometimes I was its foot. It's ridiculous.
No, I'm sure it's really like hilarious to describe, but let me tell you, it
was
works
amazing.
so well on camera.
It was so good. It was so good. And like BJ he was the main puppeteer for that one. And he had he had like a whole head contraption that he was controlling the mouth and the eyes with. And then he was like wearing the body and the feet were attached to his legs. And so then I was behind him, like with sticks in the wings, or sometimes I'd stick my hands in there when we did the fight. And I was like, rah! This is so good.
This is already the best episode of this show we've ever done, Douglas. I don't know if you knew that.
And what's neat for those of you that aren't aware of this movie, I've talked about it on the podcast before, so go check out one of the older episodes where we get into it. But on the home release, there's a making of. So I'm just going to tell you now, Samantha, when we're done, I'm going to go watch that and see if I can find you, because now I know who to look for.
Yep,
I spoke to her.
I'm probably wearing all green. I was mostly in the like chroma green outfit. So so silly. I also did, I don't know if it made the final cut. We had the one character that had the tongue. So I was her tongue in like one scene. So like it was like a whip, because I do a lot of whip work as well. So I had to whip it around an actor's neck. It was ridiculous.
Ridiculous makes for some of the best captured things on film.
It really was perfect. It was a perfect movie, and no one can tell me otherwise.
You will not hear an argument from me. Quite legitimately,
it
may have ended up on my favorites list for that.
It was everything you would ever want from a Nick Cage movie, and I thought he had peaked there, and then he came out with the new one. I don't know if you saw his new one.
Soon.
Yes,
he has, but I haven't.
Oh my God. That's all I'm going to say. I was so happy. I was just like in the theater, so happy the entire time. I was like, this is perfect.
Yeah, that movie just gave me like a nice, like warm fuzzy for 2 hours or an hour and a half or however long it is.
Absolutely.
It's just right at the edge of almost too silly, but it doesn't quite fully go there. Exactly. And he's the only actor I would want to try to do something like this.
Absolutely. Exactly. That's exactly right. It's just perfect because it was him. And you're like, this is hysterical. This is so funny.
Yeah.
I love he has not a single line of dialogue in that movie. And anyway, Daryl, have you seen it yet?
It is. Thanks to what your glowing reviews of it, it is on my to watch list on Letterboxd there. So
challenge. I'll bring it on Wednesday.
Challenge accepted, my friend. Well, there we go.
I didn't know there was like home edition and behind the scenes stuff. So I'm gonna have to buy it.
We'll talk after this. We'll see what we can do. But anyway, so you mentioned that this was a bucket list type thing. Mm-hmm. How did you get into this? I mean, you mentioned working in Ren Fair. Was it like an interest in Ren Fair first that led you to working in movies? Were you interested in movies first? Like where did this start for you?
It's my origin story. Mm-hmm. So I got into theater and acting first. And because I knew at a very young age, I used to watch a lot of like movie musicals and a lot of like Danny Kaye films and a lot of Jerry Lewis films and stuff like that. Like I just watched a lot of like old movies growing up. And so I really loved movies and I loved movie musicals and I loved that. I was like, oh, I want to do that. I'll never be able to do that. And then I discovered theater because like, I think it was like a production of Rent was coming through town.
Oh yeah.
It tells my age. And I was like, oh, I can do
there
this
with you
on stage. Yeah. And I was
You're
like,
in good company.
Crap. So that excited me. Then through school, I just was more and more convinced I want to get into acting and theater. So I went to college for musical theater performance, started finding myself doing a lot involved in all aspects of it. So I started doing more directing then as well. And I happened upon in college a sword fighting class, a stage combat class. And I literally did one of those. I walked by the door and like backed up to like look into the door, like, what is that? And I was like, I'm good. What is that? I'd be good at that. And eventually I was able to get into the class. I was good at it. I loved it. I became obsessed with like stage combat and fighting. which then led me to doing a lot of theater work that was fight related and fight heavy and movement heavy.
Okay.
Outside of once I graduated from college, I was moved into Renaissance Fair world, where with like-minded people created a Shakespeare company. So I had a Shakespeare company that toured the Midwest, because I went to school in Chicago, the Midwest area, and we did Renaissance fairs and school shows and stuff, and created our own like highly physicalized, acrobatic, like really physical adaptations of Shakespeare shows. And at the same time as that, I started my own 2-woman sword fighting show with another woman. And so we started touring around the country at Renaissance fairs. And through all that, I was like, theater, yeah. And it was one of those things for me where film was always something I wanted, back to my early days of wanting to do that, but I just didn't think I could for whatever reason, small town, small mind. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know. And then I was also developing my teaching skills for stage combat. And I was becoming a teacher with a group called the Society of American Fight Directors. And through that training, I met a fellow stunt performer and colleague named Mike Yan, who's down in New Orleans. And he had kind of recently gotten into the stunt world himself. And I saw him and I was like, if he can do it, I can do it. And next thing I know, I like made a plan and started by doing background work and learning about what it meant to hustle and to get into what kind of training I needed to fill out what I didn't have to be marketable or hireable. And I started in the Chicago area doing stunts, background work that got me into stunts. I met people doing background work that allowed me to get my SAG card. And then I got my SAG card, started doing stunts, ended up moving to Atlanta. Stunts was happening, stunts. And then the world of intimacy emerged in that time. A friend and colleague of mine through the stage combat world, her name is Tonya. She started intimacy work in theater. I knew her and have known her for a long time. At one of these workshops, I assisted her in an intimacy for stage class. And I was like, what is this? This is fascinating. And it seems very important. And I was like, but that's not what I want. I don't want to teach this. I don't know what this is. Then it developed more. Another colleague of mine, Alicia Rodas, took it, transitioned it into independent film world, where then she was discovered by HBO because they wanted to bring someone on the Deuce that did something like that. Yeah. She started doing it there. And I went, that's what I want to do with that. I called her up. I said, hey, Alicia, I think I'd be good at this. She goes, yes, you absolutely would be. I need somebody in Atlanta. And I was like, great. And it's only been like 3, not even 4 years yet. And like, it just has blown up and it's been incredible. And that's how I am now doing intimacy coordinating, as well as continuing my stunt work.
It's a lot. Just handling it all. I want to start with my most basic question when it comes to stunt work, which something that it's always in the back of my mind while I'm watching a scene happen. How do you get picked up for something? Like, do you have an agent that markets you out there? Are you having to send in auditions of previous stunts? Is there just like a director that says, I like how that person fell down the stairs, give me that person? Like how
at the mall?
That's how Chevy Chase got most of his work. It was just he keeps
just on Saturday Night Live week after week after week falling over things. Yeah, how does a stunt person get into there?
That? Yeah. So there's a thing called hustling, which can have negative connotations in like a business world, but for us, hustling means meeting people, putting yourself out there and meeting people. Essentially, people need to know you. They need to know what you can do. They need to trust you so they can recommend you. So it's very much who you know, who you're friends with, or who you come across. So it's hard now in the pandemic world, but pre-pandemic, it was figuring out where shows are happening, go to those places, be polite, and see if you can get 2 minutes with a stunt coordinator to say, hi, my name is, I live here. Can I give you my stuff? And they say yes or no. It depends on them. And everybody has different things that they do. And then you create a reel where you have your movement on there and different skills and abilities on there. You have a resume with that, but then there's also there's directories that exist on the internet that you can be a part of, and usually most of them you have to pay a little bit to be a part of it, but it's just part of your marketing. And then a lot of people will go to those as well, and they'll just be like, I need somebody who is this demographic, this age, this look, this skill. And then they're like, boop, 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 boop. And it's like, poof, here's some options. And sometimes they're like, oh God, that's my friend. I forgot about them. Hey buddy, what's up? Are you free? And they're like, yeah, I'm totally free. So it's really funny because the registry is always, it's a conversation of, there's a bunch of people who think they're not worth it and they think it doesn't do anything. But most of those people don't realize they've probably been hired because somebody just had forgotten them in a blip. And when they searched them, they're like, oh yeah, you exist. Yes, that's right. So anyway, so it's a lot of that. It's a lot of just promoting and meeting.
Get in front of the right people, making sure it's a little bit of luck plus, preparedness.
Mm-hmm. And also, like you said too, bringing up a director, it's different. It can go both ways. So sometimes stunt coordinators have full ability where they're like, okay, we need to hire X amount of people for this job or whatever. And they have kind of guidelines and they just trust you to go and make those hires and know that you're going to hire people that you trust that are good for the role. But then sometimes they want a director's pick. So you have to say, okay, here's 3 to 6 options. And then the director chooses, and then you hire that person and hope that they don't become unavailable or dates don't change. So it's a little weird to navigate sometimes.
Right on.
Out of curiosity, because, and we sort of led with this in the beginning of the episode, but we didn't define it. One of the aspects that you do as an intimacy coordinator, how would you define that so that if anyone listening to the show had never heard of it? It's something Daryl and I are familiar with. He watches way more television than I do, but we both, just with movies, do that as well. But intimacy coordination, as I understand it, has started more as a popular thing with television and is now branching into movies. I would love to hear your take on that, agree, disagree, or how you define it.
Sure. It's sort of just blobbing out. Like it's not really a defined whether it's TV or film. It's just depends on the content and the people. Now more and more network and like studios are grasping the idea of it and saying, yes, we really think you should have one. HBO says, yes, you have to have one if you have any content that is going to require nudity or simulated sex. Some of them are, depending on the show, if they're like, ooh, this show is really heavy, you should hire one. But more and more are on board with it. And they're actually developing little lists of people that they approve and are okay with in terms of like studios. I have worked mostly on television, but I have also worked film. So it's, same thing. Like I worked on a film where they then were like, oh, we're going to check with the studio and make sure it's okay that we hire you. Like send us your resume and everything. Like, oh, okay. So that's confusing sometimes too, to navigate all of that. Cause you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. You want me to work or not? This job, to define it for people that don't know what it is, it's our first and foremost, our job is to advocate for the performers. Anytime there is nudity or simulated sex in a show or a film, if the production has said for whatever reason, whether it's the production wants to bring us on, if it's the like production company, whatever, if they're like, yes, we want to bring one on, if it's the studio that's saying you have to bring one on, or if it's an actor that's saying, I would like to request one because this is heavy content. However we get there, once we're there, anytime there's nudity, simulated sex, or simulated sex acts, or sometimes just really highly sensitive situations, we get involved. And we start at the beginning by breaking down the script, and we identify any moment that could fall under that umbrella. And that can be anything from kissing to like full-on sex scenes. Kisses are not always something that we would physically need to be there for, but we like to keep them in our consideration for conversations with actors and just making sure everybody is comfortable and is not surprised by anything. We take all that information, we talk with our director, and we say, here's all the elements or all the moments that we flagged. Let's talk about them. We talk with the director in terms of what their vision is, what their hopes and dreams are for what that looks like. If there's a role specifically that needs to be exactly what is on the page, where it's like, and this guy runs through, his butt is out, blah, blah, blah. Like something that's written very specifically versus like.
So you've watched Herogasm recently. That's what you're telling us.
No, not yet. Not yet. But it happens more frequently than you think.
It's weird because I'm writing a movie called "And This Guy Runs Through and His Butt Is Out," so I don't know if my script leaked. Terrible.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've actually, that is copyright written. Sorry, we'll talk about that later. But there's roles like that are like day player roles where they kind of come in and do a thing, or they're there very specifically. And then there's roles that are a little bit more malleable, where these characters have sex, and then like, okay, well, what does that look like? And a lot of times we find out from the directors what their ultimate like thoughts are, but then also where they're willing to give and take. And like, okay, well, if we haven't talked to the actor yet, if there's boundaries around this much nudity, are you willing to like adjust that, whatever? Most of the time the answer is yes. It's very few times where they're like, they need to do this because I said so, because nobody wants that, which is great. It's great that more people are willing to understand that boundaries aren't just not boundaries, but like what an actor is or isn't willing to do isn't a yes or no, 100% or 0%. It's so many different elements depending on what your choreography is, what your cameras are, what your setups are, what the tone is, what your costumes, your props, your set looks like, and what you can hide or not hide. There's a million ways to shoot each of these scenes, and understanding that when they bring an intimacy professional on, we can help navigate that, so that way we can still shoot their vision, but not at the expense of the actors. Because we never want to put them in a situation where they are questioning, why did I take this job? Oh my God. So we take all that information, we talk to the actors, and we say, hey, here's the pitch. Now you're in charge of this conversation. Tell me what you're okay with, what you're not okay with, what your lines are. If you have all the information, what is okay, what is not okay. And once we have all that and we make sure everybody jives on the same wavelength, we get into the production mode. And depending on how they want to utilize the intimacy coordinator, sometimes we full on choreograph scenes on our own. Sometimes we have that freedom to go in and just make the bits and pieces all meld together in choreography. Sometimes we're there collaboratively, and we work with the director and with the actors. And that's my favorite way to do it, where we all work together to figure out what it is. And then sometimes we're just there as the advocate, just to make sure everybody is clear and understanding. And we'll just sort of chill back and let the actors and directors do their thing in a rehearsal, and then just go, okay, just for clarification, that was this for this many beats. And then we move into that position. Then that's the end of it. Okay, got it. Great. Just so everybody is on the same page. Yeah. And so we do all that. We work with production. We make sure everybody has the right modesty garments or any sort of costume piece that they really specifically need. We bring in different padding options so we can, to whatever the degree of comfort in terms of contact actors are or aren't, we can provide options to make sure if they want to be a foot away from a person, they can be a foot away. We figure it out. If they don't mind contact, we just make sure that for safety, that everybody's genitals are covered up. There's no contact there. And we make sure we have all of that in place on the day, so nobody else has to worry about it. So the actors don't have to worry about it. So they're not freaking out going, this and that is going to fall apart. And then we get there and we make sure the set is closed, and we're like, yeah, you guys, this is great. Everybody's doing a good job.
Now bringing up the set being closed, ideally, when it's time to film an intimate scene, who all would be there? I assume it would be the talent on screen, you all, director and DP maybe. Is there anyone else outside of that?
Kind of depends on the content and the people. So in a general sense, whoever needs to be in the room. So sometimes, like if you're doing a show that has 3 cameras, you may have 3 cameras with 3 camera operators with their people, their little camera teams with them, because maybe it's a moving shot and they have to be there to assist that. We try to limit it as much as we can. If it's going to be a situation like that where there are multiple people in the room, we just make sure that the actor knows that they don't have in their head that it's going to be a camera by itself without anybody else in the room. So we just make sure it's all communicated clearly, so there's no shock. There's no, oh man, I thought this was going to be different. Or, oh, I thought there was going to be a wall here when really that wall went away so cameras could be there. Beyond that, we make sure that we assist the AD team, making sure that we keep all people who don't need to be there go away. Nobody's looking at monitors that shouldn't be. The only people looking at monitors are people that need to be looking for their job. Like obviously a focus puller has to look at a monitor. Like that is just has to happen. But people like costumes and makeup and props and set deck, like those people we ask to look at the monitor before we start and look at it after for their references and not to keep eyes on it during. And we make sure nobody's taking pictures, things like that. Yeah, that's pretty much close set.
I have to say, the way that I've read about what an intimacy coordinator does in articles is very different as you explain.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I never would have expected, you said we bring the garments so that they don't have to worry about it. I always figured that was part of production, that it's not necessarily something that fell under your responsibility as the intimacy coordinator. And it always read to me in articles and the research that I've done, because I'm strangely curious about this stuff. And I feel like it makes me a better film critic the more that I know about whether it's stunt or this or that or whatever. It never occurred to me that that would fall underneath your purview. Communicating with talent, absolutely. That is fascinating. Just in the depth and complexity of everything that you and other coordinators like you have to balance to keep the set running.
Mm-hmm.
But it also makes a lot of sense, because if you're working with the talent, doesn't matter their age or their gender or anything, if they've got a point person that that's you, then they've got to feel comfortable that you're handling all of those things. It never occurred to me that would fall underneath that.
Yeah. And so
That's
with those things, it does depend too on what it is. And each intimacy coordinator works a little bit differently. So for the bulk of the garments, what I do is I coordinate with the wardrobe department just to make sure we have them. But then I make sure we have them, because wardrobe has to think about a million things. They're involved in every single scene with every single person in every single shot. For me, I'm coming in and I am here for maybe one scene in a whole movie. And so it's easy for me to focus on that, where it can fall off their plate on accident really easily. And especially if an actor has a specific type of garment, because we have garments that are sticky, garments that need to be made so they can, VFX will take out the straps later, like on their hips, things like that, depending on what it is. We make sure that that's happening. And in terms of, for me too, if I'm going in for a show that's like that, like one scene, and I know like, okay, I'm doing this one scene and it's a sex scene where there's a person with a penis who's going to require a pad to cover that. Instead of saying, hey, wardrobe, take all your time and go order this and that, like I just have that. In that case, I just bring that one and go, I've got it. Don't worry. I've got it handled. You guys can focus on other stuff, or like make sure we have a bandeau and a t-shirt and a tank top and a blah, 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 to make sure that we have options too, because even though we may figure out what an actor says they are comfortable with, we still want to be prepared that in case that changes, in case they go, ooh, I am comfortable with this full nudity, but then the shoot takes a long time. And it's like, okay, now we're in setups where we're not seeing you. Would you like a shirt? Yes, I would like a shirt, or not, depending on the actor. Sometimes they're like, I'm good. And we have to say, okay, can you just throw a robe on anyway? Because we need these people to be able to do their job. And we love that you're free. And we love that you love it. But they're nervous. They just want to come in and move that lamp.
Well, because you brought up something and it's spun my mind in a million of different directions. I'm very curious about this, because you say, well, I'll bring these things in. Mm-hmm. So when you're working with the actor, however they identify, do you take their measurements in order to make sure that you have stuff, or you go, okay, you want this type of equipment, and typically the costume department would have had somebody take their measurements to
Mhm.
make sure their costumes and what are accurate. Do you then go, okay, this person wants this, you have those measurements, can you make that? Or do you have, as an intimacy coordinator, is there some place that you go that okay, this person with their measurements would need this? Like,
Mhm.
how does that work?
Again, I rely a lot when something would need to be built or made. I rely on the costume department for
Okay.
that, and we have conversations in our prep with that. If it's like, okay, there's going to be a lot of nudity, but we don't have the time to do garments that stick on, so we want to create a garment that they can pull on that's like a panty but has like thinner sides.
Mhm.
Then we'll say, hey, can we develop this together and build this? So there's a lot of ingenuity and engineering going on these days, and there's a group where a lot of like a Facebook group or thread, like things like that, where just intimacy coordinators like, hey, have you guys run into this? What do you guys do for that? And then like the pictures go up and people are like, yeah, I did this once. And it's just, we get really creative. But what I found really fascinating is that because the world is becoming more accepting place to people of all genders and all backgrounds and having all different needs, a lot of the stuff that we end up using already exists. You just have to look for it. Like
Right.
drag queens for years have been developing different padding options and things like that. And it's been, being able to utilize some of that and even supporting like the trans community where they've developed different packer options and padding options and things that are products that we found we're able to use as well to support. And it's always great to be able to support those communities too and those businesses.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's just been really cool to be like, at first it was like we're all cutting out yoga pads and like, oh god, we gotta make this stuff up. And it's just like I go on like these dark dives on the like Amazon, and I'm like, does this exist? Oh my god, it exists. Like there's a pad that's designed for like a person with a vagina that's wearing like a swimsuit, and it's called camel knot, and it's designed to wear in a swimsuit so they don't have camel toe. But that pad, it's a little pad that's designed to go in that area. So that is something that's utilized often for us to just give a little extra support, a little extra mindset shift. So there is more between you and the other person if contact is happening in your choreography. So it's just fascinating and it's amazing. And I'm like just surprised by the world more and more every day.
It really is fascinating. And I say this obviously as someone not in that specific industry. My wife and I, we got on TikTok mostly as best way to put it is voyeurs, because we don't create a lot of content, but we are watching other people's content. We found it very useful for learning about, our eldest son was diagnosed with ADHD, sensory processing disorder, and general anxiety disorder. And so we found all of these people that deal with these issues. Some are just lay people, some of them are experts, and found a way to do that. But amid all of that, my wife and I have sort of ended up, we have separate accounts, and yet we still end up following, like, there's, her handle is Katosaurus. She's down in Atlanta. She does Renaissance Festival, but she's also a licensed sex therapist and ADHD and all this other stuff. You may have run into her at some point in Atlanta.
I have to look her up and I'll be like, oh.
Yeah. Pull it up on the database. Oh, there she is. No. But we see all these cosplayers and they have such incredible equipment that they're either making themselves or they've gone off. And some of them are garments that they wear. They could be, however they identify, they may have this fake bust that may have been originally created, as you pointed out, as part of the drag community that has then been not co-opted, but has found its way into the cosplay community, but obviously would be part of this acting and presentation. It is so cool how it's all interconnected. Yeah,
it's just fascinating. And it truly is fascinating. Like one of my best friends is a drag queen, and I watched them grow from baby drag queen to like full on amazing drag queen. So it went from like these weird homemade pads, same thing, and like watch them figure out how to do it and all this stuff. And we actually share an Amazon account, which is really funny. So they'll buy like the fake boobs, and then I'll buy like a fake penis for my job. And like, well, you never know. You just never know.
Now you
Okay.
talked about
Wait, hold on. Before you do that, I have to ask this. Do you or your friend have an Alexa in the house by any chance?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you get a shopping notification? Excuse me, you haven't ordered a fake penis in a while.
No,
Because we get
thankfully, I turn
notifications for like
notifications
shy.
off. I stopped though when I first started. That was also very funny. When a lot of us started, people were like, "You can turn on the private search on Google," and like, "Ooh, okay." And there became a point where I realized that was ridiculous. And if I'm just gonna have to Google really out of the box things and things that may seem weird to other people, but are absolutely not weird, and it's just a part of my life now, and it's what it is.
Yeah. NSA is like, we expect this now. Move on to the next question.
We are not surprised.
You're not surprised. You were talking about working with the costuming and all that kind of good stuff before the actual shoot happens. What's that length of time like? Are you getting with them days before, weeks before? Like, where do you come in to this in the production schedule?
In a perfect world, we would be brought on before they even do casting. That would be perfect, because I would love that, because when they do those day player roles, we will have had conversations about language that they can put out to the casting people when they're bringing in day players. So those people aren't surprised. They know exactly what they're being asked. So there's no confusion later, no recasts later. But with dealing with costumes, and it's sometimes we're brought in early, sometimes we're brought in during pre-production, sometimes we're called and they're like, hey, we have a scene next week. So kind of depends. And it depends again on the scene. If it's something that is pretty involved or out of like a standard realm, then it's like I'm on the phone as soon as possible saying, hey, I'm going to just reaching out. I'm going to reach out soon when I have more information, and just connecting as soon as I can. It's always nice though, when you get on like a full show and they bring you in the beginning and you can establish a relationship with all the departments so they know. And then you do the whole big, like, these are things I would recommend. I recommend you guys just get these in stock. And as we go, we'll just always touch base, and I'll reach out and be like, these scenes need this. And they'll be like, great. Okay. La, 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 la. Yeah, so it varies. It varies greatly. But the one thing that we do know is any sort of scene that would require a nudity or simulated sex rider has to be basically planned out at least 48 hours prior, because the actor has to sign that document 48 hours before their call time on the day they shoot it. So that was something that's newer in the SAG world that we helped them develop in the standards and practices of making sure that there's at least 48 hours. And if that information is not sent to the reps and the actors, it restarts the clock. They have to push the shoot. So productions are getting better about bringing us in a little earlier, so we're not running into those clock issues, which then puts us in a pickle with the costumes and making sure we have all the elements. Yeah, that's that.
Just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, coming from the music industry, as I did many, many lives ago, when we dealt with writers, that was usually something where the talent would say, hey, I need this in my dressing room. We want these kinds of snacks, or we won't appear until this time. We need this kind of equipment. So when you're referring to a writer, for people that may not have that experience, you're talking, is it the kind of writer where it's like, here's the language that I'm okay with, here's the part of my body I'm okay with, that kind of thing? And then when you get on set, then you choreograph it? Or what exactly goes into that writer?
So the writer is pretty much what you're saying. It's basically a document it comes from SAG has a big guideline of what should all be included and all the elements that should be included in that. The actual writer for each production comes from their legal team specifically. That writer then includes things like, it has to be specific to each scene you're doing. Like it's not supposed to just be like overall. Okay. Let me backtrack a second. So when a cast member is brought on, like a series regular, when they get first initially hired, they'll do a bunch of negotiating then with their team and the legal department and all of those people and the whatever blah, blah, blah business people.
Yeah.
But they'll do this big boilerplate rider in the beginning that's like, I only agree to like below the waist rear nudity. I don't agree to above the waist nudity at all. Like they'll kind of lay it out there usually, but sometimes even that isn't super specific. So the riders that happen from my perspective become scene specific. So we know what the scene is. So it has to lay out this scene, this performer, this actor, this player, however the legal team wants to define it, agrees to perform this simulated sex act. We try to be specific with what they're being asked to do with this character. And I usually just say with whatever character name they're being asked to do it with. They agree to this level of nudity that includes blah, 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 blah. And like, we'll say like for the absence of doubt, there will be no exposed genitals if that's something on their world, or there will be no contact made with the actor's genitals, or padding will be provided, modesty barriers will be provided. It's just sort of that like extra document that's put in place and locked in so that both parties know that they've discussed it and they agree. An actor can always withdraw their consent. If they consent to it at this moment and something changes, they can always pull back. At that point, if a rider is in place, a producer can say, okay, well, they've pulled back, but we really need this for the show. They can double the actor at the level of nudity that the actor had agreed to. That's like a producer thing. But if the actor goes through, we're going through, everything's normal, they're ready to go, la, 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 la. And then if the director goes, I've changed my mind, I actually want more than we discussed, that is like, well, hold on, reset, redo the rider, go from there. If the director goes, actually, this needs to be less, I actually don't need it to be this, then that's fine. We all can just agree and move on and film the thing.
Because you brought up doubles, do you work with them as well? I mean, are they, because I would presume, as you just, in the example you gave, the producer was like, well, we can use double for that. They're being hired more or less with the knowledge of, here's what we need to see on your body. So do you still get involved in that aspect of it, or? Okay. Yeah.
So anytime we treat, whether they're principal performers, like union members on contracts, or if they're background, whether they're union background or not union background, we deal with everybody the same way. If we are doing a scene that has background performers performing simulated sex acts, we are going to do the exact same thing. We're going to ask, what exactly do you want from the director? We're going to have conversations with them each individually. We're going to be there to support them, make sure they have what they need. And that is true across the board. With a body double, that again, same thing. Hey, they would like to hire you for this. This is what that means. This is the level of nudity that they're asking for from you. This is this, that, the other thing. Usually when a person's being asked to body double, I found they're mostly, at that point, they get it. And they're like, it's fine. You can't see my face. But, but it can always depend, and each circumstance is different. But at that point, like I worked on a show where there was a pregnant woman, and she was very pregnant going into the show. So they knew they'd have to double her for the sex scenes that she had. So she still, even though we knew it was not going to be the actor performing, the actor still had to do the rider as if it was her doing it. So that way we had that in place so we can do the double, and then the double fills out the rider as well. But then I still work with them both, and still the choreography or whatever way we're doing it with the director, if it's collaborative or whatever, I'm there for them, make sure that they're taken care of as well.
This may sound like a stupid follow-up question, but I'm going to ask it because I'm curious. There are instances where sometimes, and I think it happened in Game of Thrones with Hannah Waddington, I can't remember, where it was CG, not Hannah Waddington. She played Cersei, and I can't think of her name.
Lena Headey.
Thank you. Where she was, I think in later seasons, they did computer generation where it was her head on top of someone else's body. So would that be handled the same way as you just described with the pregnant actor, where Lena would sign as well as the physical body, even though they were going to be merged together?
Yeah, it would essentially be the same thing. It's just like if you think about stunt doubles, a stunt double's body is taking the place of the performer's body for action. And a lot of times they'll do face replacement so it seems more like the actor, but it's actually a double the whole time. So it's a similar thought process, except in the intimacy world, they have to sign the legal documents because we're considering body parts in a different way that needs to be just discussed ahead of time.
And I was watching a movie last night. Wait, hold on one second. Daryl, is this going live? This week?
I mean, it can be if you needed to.
After 9 a.m. on Friday, the 1st.
Okay, so next week.
Perfect. Okay, so then I can ask this specific question. I was watching a movie last night called The Princess. It's the new Lee Van Kett movie.
Hulu joint.
With Joey King, the actor in the lead role as the princess. And it's a very sort of R-rated adult twist on the fairy tale of the princess in the tower.
Okay.
Based on the research I did in watching the movie, she appears to be doing the majority of her stunts. There's very few body doubling appear there. Whereas, and I'm watching that and going, I was watching Morbius. Yeah, I couldn't see it until the home release. But there were very clear moments where not only was a stunt double being used, but they did do the face replication.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who has your background so varied in stunts and everything else, do you see any sort of overlap between the stunt design of where someone might do a face replacement versus someone doing the training and doing it themselves? In the sense of how you would approach a scene to design it. Is it like, do you work with the body double to make sure that they're still acting in the way that the actor needs to do it? Like, how does that aspect function? Because the two have to be seamless.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, whenever you're dealing with a face replacement type of thing, you know that's going to be happening. That's something that's discussed ahead of time. And in terms of like the stunt side of it, usually it's because it is such a high risk or high level thing that the actor just can't do it, or they won't let them do it. There's always ways where there's most of it is the stunts, but then the actor does what they can.
Mm-hmm.
So there's those elements where the actors are doing a lot of their own stunts. Of course, they're doing everything that they're doing, but they also have a stunt double. And I forgot the rest of what your question was.
No, that basically answers it, because I was just curious, because when you're dealing with a face replacement, like with the Morbius situation, or like in I think it's the shame scene in Game of Thrones with Cersei, versus when you've got an actor who trains, they practice the stunts, they work with the team for months to do as much as they can before a stunt double comes in to be the body double, if you will. You can always, at least from my perspective, you can always sort of go, oh, I don't see her face, that's not Joey King. Like, it's pretty straightforward in that regard. So do you approach it the same way, no, regardless of if it's a face swap? Because the technology is changing.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, and maybe this is the better question. How do you see intimacy coordination going forward with these changes in technology? Because you could have an actor who's pregnant, going back to your example, who's pregnant, needs a body double. The actor still got to do the job. The body double is an actor. So how do you see intimacy coordination going forward with this new technology?
Yeah, I think it's in terms of, I see face replacement happening more and more, which is, or can happen. I have not experienced in an intimate world yet, but I think it can and it will, because it depends on your content, it depends on the stories you're trying to tell, and depends on those scenes. And if you're able to do switches or not, because sometimes you think you didn't see the actor and you did, or you think you didn't see him or did see them and didn't. It's one of those things where our mind fills in a lot of the gaps. So a lot of times there are things like you're filming a scene and they do a Texas switch where it's somebody's here and then somebody else's finishes it out. We've done that for stunts, but we've done that with intimate stuff as well. I've had actors swap out with their doubles for those situations too. And it's always being creative and being as creative as you can. And it's funny because the more technology advances, I still find that the easy and fast tricks are the most effective. They really are. And for your time, for everybody's time, sometimes it's just, let's just try it. Oh, look how easy and successful that was. Okay, let's move on. Nobody's stressed out and it hasn't taken us 4 hours. Let's move on. But you did mention something about like body language and movement. And I think that's, that's something that's more to, I have an obsession with that kind of work. I love finding nuances and gestures and working with that kind of movement. And when I am doubling somebody, if I'm stunt doubling, or if I am around people who are working and there's newer people who are stunt doubling, like those are the conversations I like to have with people. Like keep an eye on how they walk, watch their gait, their speed, watch where their center is. Where do they lead from? Are they leading from their head? Do they lead from their chest? Do they lead from their hips? Do they have an even gait? Do they have a limp? Do they have a certain way they stand? When they stop and stand still, what do they do with their hands and their hips? And like that kind of stuff I like to pay attention to. And I've taught classes like this too on doubling, where if you can train yourself to pay attention to that, to know how to mimic that, and then keep an eye on like one or two gestures, because the more you can emulate that, the more the crew and the directors and the producers are impressed by you, which then they're impressed with their coordinator. And then everybody does a good job and everyone's like, yeah. And then the actors love it. They're like, let's take pictures. And it's successful for everyone, which is ultimately the goal. And it's just, and for people who don't think that way, or like some people didn't get into it the same way I did. And they just came at it from like, I love doing stuff and blah. But they're not thinking of it from a necessarily like a character driven standpoint or a story standpoint, where I am very much coming from that world. So it's interesting to see how different people approach that. But for me, I'd say it's always more successful if you can train yourself to look at those little details and be the best that you can be.
Is there ever a time where the actors themselves, like say in a body double situation, will direct their double of here's how I or my character would do this. So I want you to kind of do it like this. Absolutely.
I've had instances where I've encouraged actors to go talk to their doubles and be like, and I'll ask them and say, is there any way, is there anything you want them to know specifically? Like, and I'll kind of coach them into it. I've seen actors jump in and go over and be like, hey, I did this like this. I'll encourage actors or the doubles as well to just even go up and say, hey, is there anything you want me to pay attention to in terms of how you sit, and just give them that power and lift them up, because the more we can bring it together and realize it's a team, can break down those stereotypes that of the actors who are like against stunt doubles, and we're like, I do my own stunts, I don't need that. But the more that we can help them to realize that we are there to support them, and whether that's to emulate what they're already doing and where they're at physically, or to enhance whatever their physicality is or lower it. It totally depends, because you can have an actor that's super, super athletic and they're supposed to be, we actually had on a show, we had an actor who had a body double that was like an 85-year-old man, because he's supposed to be playing an older man. So they actually used an older man to be his body double. So that one went the other way. So now this actor who's physically capable was over there talking to this older gentleman about like, wait, how would you get in the tub? Can I watch you do it?
Yeah.
Okay. And then he's learning from that. And that was it was a really fun experience.
No, that's fantastic. Personally, I've lived a lot of different lives. I've been a teacher, I've worked in radio, I've done all kinds of stuff. But just the idea that it always seems like the stories of the sets where people realized they were part of a unit, where they were working together to create something rather than focused on ego, they always seem like great sets. And going back to our earlier conversation, that the bonus features on Willy's Wonderland, sorry, I'm gesturing towards my TV like you know where it is. It looked like a fun set. It looked like you guys were sort of working together to do this thing. Yeah. And I always got the impression that Nick Cage had really no ego anyway. So the fact that he and the writer and the director and just the team were, how do we make this movie versus how do we make my movie? And that always seems to come through wonderfully. So to hear your approach to it, it actually, as a viewer, makes me feel really good, if that sounds strange.
Yeah.
Because when I watch a movie and there's a scene that's uncomfortable, but if I feel like the actor or performers are uncomfortable, or if I know that there was an uncomfortable set, that makes, I don't think I can watch Basic Instinct anymore. Like I haven't seen it in decades anyway, but the fact that Paul Verhoeven did that to Sharon Stone, that's fucked up.
Yeah, that was
that's a breach.
Shock. That was a shock to read that and just to be so disappointed in the past and like and disappointed that it took this long to get people to realize they don't have to be doing that to people. They don't have to scare people. They don't have to force people, that there's ways to do things collaboratively that is successful and everybody's happy. It's our job. We shouldn't be terrified to go into work.
Right. What are some common misconceptions about intimacy scenes that you've seen out there?
People still sometimes think that people are actually having sex.
That means the director and the actors are doing a damn good job, I would assume.
Yeah, like people still think that and I sometimes when we have like those body doubles, for example, I've had people be like, wait, do I have to have I talked to my boyfriend, I have to have sex. It's like, oh no, you don't actually have to do it. There's that, but then there's also like with my job, people I think have this funny idea that we are like in there like constantly like, are you okay? Are you good? Are you okay? Like, okay. And then let's put your hand here and there and there. And it's like, it's so funny because our job exists and it has to exist on a spectrum where you have to meet the people where they're at. And some people want more and they want more attention. They want more specifics. They want you to say, let's choreograph exactly where my hand goes at exactly what time. And some people are like, I told you I'm good. Please leave me alone. So like you have to learn how to read people really, really well to be able to not be overbearing or not be too pulled back either. So that's I'm finding still kind of a misconception for our job, and that people think we're just like in it and like,
hey buddy, doing a great job. Hey, hang in there. Squirt some water on the forehead.
Exactly. Like, you're still good. You want some water? You're still good. You're still good at this.
Sorry, it feels like a Zucker brother movie. Just the scene's happening and a hand just reaches out, just dabs them on the forehead.
In my future, I hope there is an amazing series about this job and about intimacy coordinators, but I want a hand in the creative process in writing that, because there are a lot of really funny things that happen in this job, and I would love to see it represented well someday, because people are trying to jump on the bandwagon. And every time you see an intimacy coordinator pop up in a TV show, it's like, that's not right.
Haven't quite gotten it right yet. Are there any mistakes that you've seen made by younger or inexperienced filmmakers when it comes to how they would like to portray their sex scene?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I've seen mistakes made from people who are newer and younger, and mistakes made from older and veteran, well-versed, been in the business for 30 something years, because I think the conversation has shifted. Everybody's learning, whether you're new or old or older in the business or more experienced. People are having to learn a new way. They're having to learn to not fight this position, because we are not here to censor you. We're not here to censor the directors or the ADs or the whoever or the writers. We're here to support and create and tell the story that you want to tell. So I have come across people that have made those mistakes where they try to fight it, or they won't become available, or they won't just open up and have an honest conversation about like, what do you really want to see? Like, no, seriously, you can ask me, I can ask them. It's not weird if I ask them. But then you get the people that will fight it, and they'll go and they'll ask actors these big asks, and then actors will shut down because they didn't know how to talk about it. Because a lot of, I find right now, and for me, at least my experience has been, it's still very educational. A lot of what I'm doing is teaching performers how to talk about their boundaries. It's just something that hasn't really been discussed. People are learning to say no, but it's teaching them again how to say no, but I'm comfortable with this. to make it collaborative, because that's that if you just shut it down, then everybody stops. So how do we all come together and find that right scene, the right elements to make the scene happen?
Cool. Well, before we wrap, I did want to ask one very serious, very intense question.
Okay.
If you could recommend 5 movies for somebody to watch, what would you recommend? What are favorites or films that got you into, as you mentioned, got you into wanting to be an actor?
And also to tag on to that, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
If you could also recommend one movie at the end of that of what you think is an incredibly well shot, intimate performance.
Contains one, yeah.
Yeah,
that's
that
a
contains.
Okay, I got one.
Good question.
I got that.
Better
I got
question.
that. But it also happens to be my favorite movie, The Fifth Element. It has the steamiest. It has several very steamy, intimate moments in that film that were just really well done in a way that didn't show things and kind of showed some things, but then they made it network safe.
Yeah.
But because when I read your pre-questions, I was like, oh man, I don't even. Oh, but that's truly my favorite movie, and that happens to check both those boxes.
There you go.
Other movies that are my top 5.
It doesn't have to be your top.
No,
Just
but
favorite.
it is. And that's it's funny because it's The Fifth Element, Waterworld.
Well, this is already going in a direction I did not see.
No, this is no. Keep going. I own Waterworld.
Waterworld.
My wife has a multi-pass hanging on her side of the bedroom.
I love that. Logan's
this.
Run.
Which one?
Logan's Run.
Logan's Run.
White Christmas.
There you go.
And The Emperor's New Groove.
Yes. Beware the groove.
This is the wildest list I've ever heard of.
It is a
That's just
fantastic
That's
list.
me in a nutshell.
Okay, Samantha, because you'll appreciate this. My wife and I love that movie, by the way, Emperor's New Groove.
Yeah.
And my eldest, he literally just turned 7 a few days ago. Today, Daryl lost his first tooth. Finally came out.
That's exciting.
But for like weeks, he's been playing with it. And all, yes, that's the only joke Crystal and I have been making. Look at this. So, yay, good list.
That is a good list. I
mean, it's your list. So, I mean, who cares what we think? But I agree.
It just makes me laugh. Every time I told people I really like Waterworld, they get mad at me. And I'm like, you don't know. Waterworld
really good.
Shaped me as a person.
It is a movie. Yes.
Don't listen to him. I think I saw that movie 2 or 3 times in the theater. I enjoyed it.
No surprise there.
What? We like what we like. We will not change.
For me, it's the water element and it's the world building element for me that I love that kind of stuff.
And it's done really well. Like they take their time with it. It's in the strange circumstance, but they set the rules and then they just go. It's one of the few movies where what?
I said and go.
Okay, Mr. Waiting for Dune Part 15 over there. The spice will flow for years. Let us enjoy the one movie, man.
Fair enough.
Well, Samantha, thank you so much for taking this time with us to talk about what you do. We felt like we joke around about a lot of different things, but this we thought was something that we don't know enough about, something that our listeners may not know enough about, but the people that we engage with are very interested in movies and how they're made. Mm-hmm. So thank you. Thank you for your time and thank you for educating us. We really do appreciate it.
So welcome. You're so welcome.
Pull back a giant curtain on one of the, I guess I would say, the less publicly talked about aspects of filmmaking. And it's always good to shine a light in those corners, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially because lately, most of the time you hear about intimacy coordinators, it's either with a situation that's gone badly or a program that might be highly sexualized.
Yeah.
So intimacy coordinator might be interviewed, but you may not really know about what they're doing. So thank you so much for this. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Close us out, Douglas.
Oh, right. I'm not used to this part. Anyway, so for everybody listening, thank you for joining us for the show. Samantha, what is something that is coming up? If people wanted to find something that you've worked on, what might be coming up? Anything. That's legitimately not what I was going for. I could see your face being like, oh, really? That's not the volley I was sending. But
I
just
thought
anything. No, I mean, if there's something that either you'll be appearing in on camera as a stunt person, background player, otherwise, or something that you've worked on as an intimacy coordinator that we should keep an eye out for.
Well, there's I've got two I can mention that are either just came out or coming out that are very wide on the spectrum of what my job did.
Okay.
I worked as an intimacy coordinator for one episode of Ms. Marvel. And you'll notice I'm just going to spoil this. There's no nudity or sex. It was because they were being cautious and aware, and they just wanted to be supportive and make sure the actor felt supported in like one little itty bitty scene. So I support and applaud them for having the hindsight to bring me out for that. And then on the flip side, Tyler Perry's All the Queen's Men on BET and BET Plus. I think season 2 maybe is coming out soon. But I did the first season and the second season, and I actually got to co-do that with another intimacy coordinator in town, Nikki Tomlinson. That show is wild, and it's the exact opposite, and it's crazy, and it's eventful, and take a look.
Awesome.
There you go.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who was taking a listen. Daryl, thank you for letting me take the reins. It was terrifying. Don't ever let me do this again.
Don't worry, I won't. That is it for this episode of The Cinnamon. You all take it easy out there and have a good one.
Later.